The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind, the Tathagata. Today is day 6 of this 7-day session here in October. I'm getting ahead of myself here. 2022 in northern New Mexico at Mountain Gate. And I'd like to share with you something of the great Zen master, Chan master, really, because he was Chinese, Linqi, also known as Rinzai, and he is the head of the Rinzai sect. Of course, he's not the head of it at this point in time because he was born in 800 something. He didn't live a long life. I think his dates are, hold on a second, are 810 to 866. So he didn't really live very long. Although in that era, he probably was considered quite old when he died, even though in this day and age he wouldn't be. He was quite dynamic and is responsible for the dynamism that still pervades the Rinzai sect. And he is also responsible for the emphasis on koans in the Rinzai sect. He was a very deep teacher. And one of the koans that is used in the Rinzai sect is actually something that he said. In this 5-foot lump of red flesh, in other words, in our body, even if we're 7'2", there's a true person of no rank coming in and out of the doors of the senses. If you've not seen it yet, see it now, see it now. There's a true person of no rank coming in and out of the doors of the senses in every single one of you. No exceptions. And through our practice, we come to meet face to face that true person of no rank who has no face, nor do we. And that's another koan. So Rinzai was ordained relatively young. There's not much known about his early life. And he was not ordained in the Zen sect or the Chan sect initially, apparently, but eventually found his way to Huangpo, who is also known in Japanese as Obaku, a most amazing, deeply realized Chan master. And he was there in the assembly for 3 years. And the head monk had noticed him because he had a purity about him. And so the head monk finally asked him one day, have you ever asked the abbot a question? Back then, they didn't have actual formal sanzen. If a monk had a question about practice, they just went to the abbot's room and asked the abbot personally what that question was. Or sometimes the abbot in an assembly of monks would basically open up to questions. So in this case, Mucho, the head monk, said, why don't you go ask a question of the abbot? You've been here long enough. Surely you must have a question. And Rinzai said, well, I don't know what to ask him, so that's why I haven't gone. And so Mucho said, well, why don't you go and ask him to expound to you the meaning of the Buddha Dharma? In other words, the meaning of the teachings, in other words, to teach you. And so Rinzai went and appeared on Huangpo's doorstep and asked him the question, at which point he got whacked with the master's stick. There's a particular staff that is the sign of authority of a master, whether it's Soto or Rinzai. And this is what he was whacked with. And it just kind of shocked him because he thought he was just going to ask an honest question, and he gets beaten. So he goes back to Mucho, who asks him, well, how'd it go? And this is to Rinzai's credit. He didn't get angry. He said, I don't quite understand what happened. I asked the question, and the master beat me. I don't know where my fault is. And so he was accepting first a full responsibility for the reaction of Huang Po, even though it was rather odd and startling, which of course it was meant to be. It's always been through history. I wouldn't say always, but so frequently been through history that when a person is suddenly brought up short through something or other that happens to them, and Rinzai masters are masters at this technique, they can suddenly come to awakening. Yesterday I mentioned Jutan blowing out the candle. The monk went to visit the master and asked him, most likely in the same situation, about the Dharma. He had some questions about it. Obviously, he'd been seriously, deeply puzzled by these questions and talked at length with the master. And finally, the master said, it's getting late, you need to go. And so the monk left and came back right away and said, it's dark outside, meaning I can't find my way back to where I'm staying. And so the master lit a candle and handed it to the monk. And as soon as the monk took it, he blew it out. And that sudden, unexpected gesture brought about an awakening in the monk. Now, of course, there was a lot going on before it. The monk had spent a long time with inner questioning. And so he was ripe when that master blew out the candle. Just blowing out the candle probably wouldn't have been enough otherwise. But in his mind state of perplexity, in his presence, and certainly he was suddenly increasingly present when the candle was blown out. There are other stories, similar stories, and a lot of these being struck stories are an attempt by a master to bring a student to awakening. Or sometimes they'll just say, I spare you 60 blows. And the student thinks, what? I just asked a question. What did I do wrong? So Rinzai said, I don't really understand his kindness. I can't figure it out, but I must have some negative karma behind me that would make it thus. So Mucho said, well, go again. Check it out. Ask him one more time. So dutifully, Rinzai went and asked Huang Po again, could you please expound the Buddha Dharma? Please explain the Buddha Dharma to me. And again, he got hit. So this is twice now. What am I missing? What am I not getting? And Mucho asked him again, how did it go this time? He said, he did the same thing. I don't understand what my fault was. And so Mucho says, well, one more time. Maybe this time it'll work. So Rinzai went one more time, and again, the same treatment, whap. And so he went back to Mucho and said, obviously, I don't seem to have what it takes to be here. So I think it's time to leave. He was quite discouraged. And I say this because this is something that can happen for pretty much every Zen student. At a certain point, and often more than one certain point, we can get very discouraged in our practice. We think we're not getting anywhere. But it's important to recognize, and this is why faith is so vital in Zen practice. It's important to recognize that we're not always conscious of the workings of our mind. And we can feel like we're getting nowhere, like we're failing, but actually the wheels are turning within, and we just stay present long enough, and boom, some big insight will come forth. So if you find yourself discouraged in your Zen practice, take heart. Even Rinzai, the great Zen master whose lineage still lives on to this day, and whose lineage actually, of the 5 houses, his was one of the 5 houses. The only other house was the Kaodong, known in Japan as the Soto sect. Those are the only 2 houses left of all the strains of the master's teachings coming in from China. And it spawned Hakuin, the great Zen master, the great Rinzai Zen master, who actually resurrected Rinzai Zen in Japan. So Rinzai decides he's not worthy of being in that assembly. And Mucho says to him, well, you know, it's only polite to say goodbye to the abbot before you leave. And then Mucho went hurriedly to the abbot and said, be kind to this young man. He's very special. And someday, I think the expression was, he will become a towering tree, giving shade to all of humankind. So when Rinzai went to see Huangpo to say goodbye, Huangpo said, you don't really need to go very far. Just go down to the river and see this monk named Taiyu. And so that's what Rinzai did. So he goes to the monk, and the monk says, where'd you come from? And he said, well, I came from Huangpo's place. And he said, well, what did he have to say to you? And so Rinzai relates the story. And Taiyu says, you idiot. Here he was, giving you the kindness of an old lady. Why couldn't you get it? And at that, Rinzai was awakened. And of course, that awakening took place because he was perplexed, 3 times beaten, not sure why, wondering what was really going on, searching deeply within himself. And that produced a ripeness that made it possible for that yell at by Taiyu to awaken him. And so Rinzai's response was, oh, so Huangpo was not such a big deal after all. And Taiyu said, what do you mean? What did you see? And instead of answering in words, Rinzai punched him in the ribs, or just below the ribs, several times. And Taiyu said, get out of here. You're not my student, you're Huangpo's student. Go back and see Huangpo. And so Rinzai did go back and continue training, and eventually inherited Huangpo's Dharma. And I'd like to now share a few teachings besides that one that I just shared with regard to the true person of no rank. And this underscores that true person of no rank, which is who we really are. Here are some of the things he said, and this is from the Rinzai Roku, which are the sayings and doings of the Zen Master Rinzai. In this particular case, it's from the translation by Ruth Fuller Sasaki and her team of translators. Followers of the way, the one who at this moment before my eyes is shining alone and clearly listening to my discourse. This person tarries nowhere. This person traverses the 10 directions and is freely themselves in the 3 realms. In traveling everywhere, through every land, in bringing enlightenment to sentient beings, this person is never separate from their present mind. Everywhere is pure light, illumining the 10 directions, and the 10,000 dharmas are one as is. Dharmas, really, when it's in a small d, it means the phenomena, everything. Everything is phenomena. If it has a capital D, it means the teachings. Then there's another saying. There's only the person of the way listening to my discourse, dependent upon nothing. They are that one is who is the mother of all Buddhas. Followers of the way, the you who are right now listening to my discourse is not your 4 elements. In other words, this is not your body that is listening. Not that it's separate. That's an important thing. But consider this true person of no rank coming in and out of the doors of the senses. It continues. In the eyes it is called seeing, in the ears it is called hearing, in the tongue it is called tasting, in the hands it is called holding, and the feet is called walking. What is it? And don't start thinking that there is a soul. Who are we? Once we begin to fathom this bunch of stories that we've collected about ourselves, and we come to recognition that they're just stories, then who's the real one? What is the real one? This true person of no rank, nobody, coming in and out of the doors of the senses. Who is that one? See it now. That one is the face before your parents were born. That one is you. If you want to freely live or die, go or stay, to take off or put on your clothes, that means your sense of yourself, your ideas, your persona. Then right now, recognize the person who is listening to my discourse. That person is without form, without characteristics, without root, without source, and without any dwelling place, yet is brisk and lively. This is what it says also in the Prajnaparamita Sutra. The heart of perfect wisdom, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no color, sound, smell, taste, touch, or what the mind takes hold of, nor even active sensing, no ignorance, nor end of it, nor all that comes of ignorance, no withering, no death, nor end of them. Who are you? Once you can plumb this right to the root, you will become free. So that no matter what happens, even if you're a target of a missile strike in Ukraine, you are still free. And there is still no problem. How can that be? Find out. And lastly, when at these words you turn your light in upon yourselves and never seek elsewhere, then you'll know what your body and mind, that your body and mind are not different from those of the patriarch Buddhas. And on the instant of nothing to do. This is called obtaining the Dharma. Somewhere long ago, or perhaps more recently if we're just starting Zen practice, we have had a sense of this potential for freedom. And it is available. But it involves giving everything away that you find you identify with. When I came to Zen practice, it was because I had lost everything. There was nothing left except to go inward. It was an exceedingly wrenching time, but I knew that there was nothing outside me that would keep me happy, that would give me lasting happiness, that give me joy, that would take away the anguish. And so I sat down, crossed my legs for the first time in January 1st, 1974. And I cannot tell you that it was easy, because it wasn't. The pain of the loss stayed with me for a long time. But ultimately, it's possible to open to more and more innate freedom. And that's the thing. Freedom is innate in each one of us. It's only covered over by the stories, by the conditioning, by the assumptions about ourselves. And in practice, like Rinzai, we can mistakenly assume that we can't do it, that we're a failure. This is all wrong. Keep going, regardless. When I first started doing Zazen, every time I sat on the cushion, I burst into tears because the anguish was so deep. And then after that came the terror. But today, there is only freedom. And you can realize that as well. I thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.